Welcome to B2B Tech Talk, Ingram Micro's destination for information on technology, business, and the people that make them run. This episode is sponsored by Xvantage, Ingram Micro's game changing platform designed to help your business run better and grow faster. If you're a woman in technology, blazing a successful trail is incredibly rewarding. Turning that passion into a purposeful mission is both gratifying and joyful. AnnMarie Santamarina is a CEO, a chief value officer, an author, a coach, and speaker who also happens to be a member of Ingram Micro's TrustX Alliance community, where she has been leading their Women of TrustX initiatives. AnnMarie Santamarina, welcome to B2B Tech Talk. I have been so looking forward to this interview, and the reason why is I just know we're going to get vulnerable today.
Nina, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here in your company and just really thrilled to be invited to be a guest on this podcast. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. Now, you have had an amazing career, AnnMarie. You have been a business owner, a woman in technology business owner, an author, a coach. What else am I missing?
I mean, a community
I was
advocate.
going to say yes. In working in philanthropy, being a community supporter. You've done. I mean, I've kind of followed you, and then of course I've read your book, and you've blown me away. You really have blown me away. Um, let's let's talk business for just a little bit. You came into the IT world at a time where women were not so prevalent. How'd you do it?
That's a really interesting question. I I would say I'm going to say it was a little bit by accident, and I know that that sounds kind of like, well, what does that even mean? I had just graduated college,
Hmm.
and I wanted to get a job in my field, which is
Hmm.
marketing. I
Hmm.
studied marketing in college, and I saw a marketing job for an IT company,
Hmm.
and I applied for it, and I met with the president of the company, and it turns out it was a temporary job, so it was
Hmm.
only about 20 weeks. I think the person was
Hmm.
going on maternity leave, and he was interviewing me, and he said, I don't want to put you in something kind of temporary. I like your skills. I
Hmm.
think you could make a difference here. And he started talking about the role that he saw for me. He had a vision. The I guess an important thing to note or mention is that I had been an administrative assistant until that point while I was putting myself through college. And I just want to say to all the administrative assistants, your jobs are so meaningful. Anybody who's doing anything behind the scenes, supporting people, like that was probably one of the most meaningful jobs I had in my career because I got to see a lot of things from a leadership
Sure.
and management perspective without being responsible for the leadership outcomes. So it was a really early blessing in my
Hmm.
career that I
Hmm.
didn't quite understand until much later. But anyway, so I'm meeting with this president of
Hmm.
this IT VAR at the time, and he says, so I need like someone to support my service team. And Nina, I didn't want to do that anymore. And I felt like I was going to constantly get
Hmm.
pigeonholed. And I got up in the middle of the interview and put out my hand and said, I really want to thank you for your time, but I'm just not interested in that. And he's like, what are you doing? Sit down, sit down. And so he ended up hiring me as a consultant
Okay.
to work in his services department, which
Okay.
was newly evolving at the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
And he's like, I just like your skills, and I think you could make a difference here. So I kind of started as a service
Hmm.
coordinator,
Hmm.
and then just evolved into a project manager and some other roles within inside that organization. So that's how I first started working in
Okay.
IT.
Wow. And then what happened between that and running your own company?
So I worked in that particular company for several years, and I met my business
Hmm.
partner
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
And he always wanted to start his own firm,
Okay.
and so he presented this idea to me about like starting a business, and I was like, sure, I got nothing else going on. Like that
Yeah.
sounds like a good idea. And we were both really excited about being able to bring kind of what we felt the vision was for
Yeah.
how you deliver IT services to corporations and businesses. So that's how we started the company in 1998.
And that company was
Tajas Technologies.
Tajas Technologies. That's right. Was Ingram involved with Tajas?
Yes, but
Okay.
not until about 10 years later.
Okay, okay. How did Ingram come into the picture?
So we were on this, trajectory, right? We were
Right?
growing, and obviously we had relationships. We had to buy equipment that
Mhm.
was part of what we did. And Ingram was almost like the white elephant or the whale. I don't know
Yeah,
what you call
yeah,
it, but like that. Oh, can we get there?
yeah.
Like we just, it was an industry
Yep.
standard, and we had an HP deal, I think
Mhm,
HP
mhm.
HPE now, and my partner said we have to get this from Ingram, like make it happen, basically, because I handled all the vendor
Yeah,
relationships. And so, I went through the application
yeah,
process, did all these things, and we were approved to become an
yeah.
Ingram customer. And so that's how I started my relationship with Ingram,
Okay.
which obviously has led to many other
Oh,
things.
yes, it led to many, many other things, including your relationship with TrustX Alliance. So, how did that I mean, who doesn't love being involved with Darren Gottesman, Kelly Sander, Kelly Fox? What a great group of people.
So Darren Gottesman was my field account executive at Ingram Micro when we joined
Get
Ingram Micro.
out.
Probably, I guess, like into a year, we
Yeah,
fell into his
yeah.
bucket.
Uh-huh.
And Darren, being who he is, came out to our
Yeah.
offices and he met with me. And we talked about my business and
Mhm.
my dreams and the goals for the business. And just, I mean, what you see of Darren
Yes.
today is
Isn't he the best?
exactly, I mean,
He's the
he's
best.
incredible. And he's been a mentor to me in a lot of ways, as well as, just someone who saw things in me probably
Mhm,
before I even saw them in myself.
mhm.
And so I just want to say out loud how grateful I am for him and his shepherdeship. I don't think that's a word, but like his, like how he shepherded me and invited me to do things. So Venture Tech Network at the time, VTN, was the community.
Mhm,
And he mentioned to me that he thought I should join. And, I was thinking about this, Nina, and I was thinking about, because I declined at first.
mhm.
And I declined because I couldn't. One of the things I work with my clients today on coaching is helping them create a vision beyond their current circumstances. And I realized at that moment in time, I wasn't able to see my own vision beyond my current circumstances. I was so buried in the day to day, like just wanting to make sure that the employees got paid and
Right.
that the
Sure.
customers were happy. And it was just about all the people in my immediate sort of center of
Mhm, mhm.
responsibility. So, but he didn't stop asking, thankfully. So I eventually said yes and joined Venture Tech and was here through the
Yeah.
rebranding of TXA. And then once I got here, I was like, okay, how do I become a chapter officer?
Of course, all that great energy and just it's family, isn't it? I mean, that's
Yes.
it. I hear that over and over again from TrustX partners. But now you so involved in TrustX, you're actually working with other women. And I want to talk about that because you've got a little bit of a different view on women, how we communicate, how we forget to invite men to the conversation. Talk to us about that.
So when I sold my business five
Yeah.
years ago, I was thinking about what's next.
Mhm,
And I had been working with a coach to
mhm,
help me through the transition of the sale of my
mhm,
business and all of those decision
mhm.
points for me and the fear and all the blocks. And she would say to me consistently, I would share with her in our
Right.
sessions some of the challenges that I would have in, communicating with men and, my
Mhm,
business partner,
mhm.
maybe even clients,
Right.
and I could be, I'm one to kind of address something.
Mhm,
Like if
mhm.
something comes up, I want to address it
Sure.
because if it festers, it typically comes out in the
Yes.
wrong place. And she would say to me, I really hope that at some point you're going to step forward and help other women maneuver these conversations the way I've seen you do it.
Right.
Because I would check in with her, like, hey,
Yeah.
I had this conversation
Yep.
today and this is how it went. And she would give me feedback.
Mhm,
Sometimes you can do this
mhm.
better next
Yep.
time.
Sure.
And sometimes, wow, I think that was really effective that you stepped into that, even though it was difficult. So I felt this call to help other women do it. Again, somebody recognizing maybe a vision beyond my current
Yep.
circumstances on behalf of
Yep.
me, which I really appreciate. And so I really just want to create a safe space
Yeah.
where we can come together. And I think it's important to note too that for most of my career, I didn't get involved with women organizations, partially because of bandwidth,
Right.
right?
Sure.
But also partially because I didn't want to be separated from the
Yeah.
men.
Yeah.
I wanted to be in the same room at
Yeah.
the same table.
Yeah. Yes.
And TrustX really gave
Yeah.
me that opportunity. Although there were some times of that I even felt intentional
Right.
exclusion, and I talked
Yeah.
about that in the breakfast that I had at
Yeah.
GCIS. Um, and a lot of the men that I knew said, "Wow, we didn't even realize that you
Yeah.
felt that way." Right. So just kind of recognizing that maybe we're holding on to a story
Right.
about why we're not connected in a certain way. And if we just invited the opportunity for a conversation
Right.
or, hey, Joe, I don't, there's no
Yeah.
real Joe. I'm just using an example. Hey, Joe, I felt kind of bad when you put together that, golf outing and you didn't ask me,
Yeah.
Now, if you didn't invite me because I'm not a golfer, I
Yeah.
understand. But if you forgot about me because I'm a woman, then maybe just think about that the
Yeah,
next
you
time.
made the assumption that I
Right.
didn't play because I was a woman. I completely agree with you. I think gone beyond the women getting together and airing their grievances to let's have a meaningful conversation with men at the table so we can move forward instead of just spinning the same cycle. And you
Yes.
had a phrase for it. What's the phrase?
Equalizing the conversation.
Yes, it's beautiful, equalizing the conversation. I love that, and I actually wrote it in my notes. Now I want to go to you a little more personally. At age, and if do you mind?
No, not at
Okay,
all.
okay. At age 25, you found out from your mother that you were adopted at a time where you're trying to figure life out, figure your career out, and you still managed to do that, which is mind-boggling to me. Take us from that point on and how that impacted some of the decisions you made.
So I had just moved to St. Augustine, Florida. My family had moved there 6 years earlier because my dad's job had gotten relocated. And I opted to stay in New York City where I grew
Mhm.
up. And my mom and I were having a conversation, and she said, "I'm really glad that you're here because there are some things I want to tell you." And I have an edge of sarcasm
Yeah.
to me, and so I sort of looked at her and I said, "Oh, like what? That I'm adopted?" And she looked right back at me and said, "Yeah, actually, yes, you are." And I didn't believe her. I'm like, "Come on, mom. Like
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
funny." She's like, "No, Amory, like it's really true." And then I didn't really hear a
Yeah.
lot of what she
Yeah.
said
Yeah. Right.
after
How I
that.
was going to say, how could you?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, she had a little like kitchen island, and
Mhm.
I was just like sort of sitting there in this house that I'd never lived in
Right.
because they had moved there,
Right.
and I was just like, what is happening right now? And had it been like now, I would be like, is this a reality show? Is like Ashton Kutcher here somewhere, like gonna prank me? But it was true. And she had a series of reasons about why she had never
Mhm.
told me. Um, and I was going back to school. That's why I
Yeah.
moved to St. Augustine. So I was already in this weird sort of identity
Mhm. Mhm.
crisis. Like at 24, I was almost 25, 2 weeks before my birthday, and I'm going to be like in freshman and sophomore
Mhm.
classes in a city that I'd never lived in. Oh, and now I'm adopted. So it was kind of emotionally paralyzing, and
Yes.
also like incredibly confusing.
Yes.
And I kind of, in my fashion, how I learned to deal with emotions, I just sort of compartmentalized it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I don't have time to deal with this right now. So thanks for the intel, mom, but I'll have to come back. And it took me, some time to process. I went on with what my intentions were, which
Mhm.
would go to college, and ended up meeting lifelong friends that I'm still in touch with and are still a very big part of my story. But obviously, nothing was the same.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that was good because I had some attachment to some stories about my family and who I was supposed to be in that
Right.
family. And this new information gave me a little bit of freedom
Right.
to think differently about what I could do for myself.
Right. Right. Interesting. So, what I find absolutely incredible about you is your, I, it must be a New York thing. New Yorkers are so strong. But you continue to march forward. You march forward, you finish your education, started your career, you started a business. You sold to Lincoln, right? Yeah,
I
so
did.
Lincoln IT, and now you're still with Lincoln IT, serving in a sales leadership.
No, no. So I'm actually a consultant.
Okay,
Yeah, so I stayed on almost full time for about
okay.
3 years, and
Hmm.
then worked with our CEO Teddy
Yeah,
Sillis, who's also another big part of
yeah,
my story. Was also a Trust X
yeah,
Alliance member, so that's how we
yeah,
met. We already had a really trusted
yeah,
relationship, so it made the acquisition and the transition that much easier.
yeah. It's beautiful.
Um, but I went to him in like mid 21 and said, I really like being here because I did and I do, but I sold my business because I wanted to do some other things. And I'm finding that here in a full time capacity, I can't focus on those other things. So, what can we do? Like, is there
Yeah,
any? I would like to work a little bit less.
yeah.
And he obliged. He's like, well, let's make you a consultant.
Okay.
This is what it'll look like. And that's evolved, a couple of times since then. But, actually, we've got some new leadership
Hmm.
at Lincoln, and our VP of sales is here this week at 1. And I'm showing him kind of around,
Yeah,
through my lens. So I'm excited for that because I think that, we all have to grow,
yeah.
right? And if I can bring things that I'm doing out in the industry back to Lincoln in some capacity, it makes me feel like I get to do all the things that I really enjoy.
I love that. I think especially during this time of transformation, everything is transforming, and whether you call it digitally or whatever. But I think the most significant part for me and what I'm hearing from you is things don't really happen until you give space for them to happen. You have to have the space to think about it, to process, and or else you're still on the hamster wheel, right? Just spinning and spinning. And somehow you managed to find that space. And now I look at what you're doing. You've written a book, From Survival to Safety, which I brought with me, which I will have you sign. And I love one of the things that I loved about the book is that you acknowledge so many people in the Ingram Micro community and the people that serve the community as well. Why'd you do it?
Why did I write the book? Or
Yes. And then the acknowledgement to all the Ingram folks.
um, well, I wrote the book because it's something I've always wanted to
Yeah.
do. And people will hear me say when they ask me about the sale of the business, there were a couple of reasons that I wanted to
Mhm.
sell, but the number one reason was because I felt like in the size that my business
Mhm.
was, in the industry that we are in the market that was ever changing, I couldn't find the time to think.
Mhm.
I know that sounds a little, but
I
I
get it.
wanted more time
Yeah.
to think, which really meant I wanted more time to create.
Right.
And I wanted also to be able to serve my clients at a higher
Mhm.
level. And so this has been a 5 year journey. October 1st
Mhm.
will be 5 years that we started with Lincoln and sold. And I'm really grateful that I was able to open up the space. With regard to the book, I've always wanted to write a book, as I said, and I was planning on writing a book about being a woman CEO in IT. So look for a second book because it's still in me. But I was at the point in my own personal growth journey,
Mhm.
Nina, where um, I knew this adoption situation, right? It was a situation for
Yeah.
me that occurred now 30 years ago. Do the math, 31 years ago.
Mhm.
And I was like, if I'm ever gonna like find my biological
Yeah.
family, and this is a missing piece of my story, like what am I waiting for? And since I had the space more than I had ever in the past, I prioritized it. And I decided to write the book about this because I wanted to be accountable.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I thought that if I made the commitment to do it as a book, it turned out it gave me so much more in return because it was kind of like journaling out
Yes.
the situation as it was unfolding. So it gave me a place to take my feelings and my thoughts and my experiences from the past, what was happening now in this search for my biological family, and then what's evolving into for me and in my own life.
When I read the book, my first thought was, I know her. You write it in such a way where it it is not a superficial awareness of who you are. It's a deep knowledge of who you are, and it's very personal. And that was my first thought, like, I know her. And then my second thought was, wow, she knows me too. She's writing about things that I feel. And that was really a beautiful outcome. I love to read. I read lots of books, and that was my takeaway. But it's beautiful how you included so many people, Dare and Holly Nijelski, um, just so many people I know. And typically, when an author gives acknowledgement to people, they'll put, oh, my children, or, whatever. You put so many people. Why?
Okay, so real talk here. Can I give
Real,
you a full
yeah,
transparency behind the
real,
scenes look?
real talk.
So I wrote the book through this course.
Uh-huh.
I signed up for it to have that
Uh-huh.
accountability, and they assign you editors throughout
Uh-huh.
the process
Uh-huh.
that you work with, and they coach you through what
Right.
you're supposed to do. And because it's self-published, I had a pre-sale,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so people bought the book back in November and
Right.
December when it wasn't even fully
Hmm.
finished, and then with the promise that they would get
Yeah.
it when it was published. When I was doing the acknowledgments, I was told specifically I could only put the names of the people in the book who pre-bought the book.
Ah.
So Darren's name's actually not in the acknowledgments section, and he called me out
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's inspired me to do a
Yeah.
series around that. The people that you see there that saw it, I was promoting it on social
Yeah.
media, whatever. I was blown away by how much support I did get from the Ingram family, from the community. I mean, it truly blew me away, Nina, and I'm so grateful. And not only in that pre-sale, right, but since the book has been out, I'll see people. I just saw someone earlier, and Kelly Carter, and she's like, "I bought your book. I'm
Ah.
reading it," and I feel so blessed. I
Yes.
feel so seen.
Yes.
And if I could, touch on one thing, if it's okay.
Of
One of
course.
the themes in the book is about this story of abandonment that
Uh-huh.
I told
Yeah.
myself that when people got to know the real me, they would leave. That was a
Yeah.
story that I was carrying
Sure.
around. And I took this course called The Rewrite to kind of address that story and,
Mhm.
and put a different spin on
Yeah.
it. There's a chapter in the book that talks about new data, new
Yeah.
story, right? When we're in IT, so the
Yeah.
data is
Yeah.
important. That story is so not true. I mean, just the support that I've received from I call it my professional
Yeah.
community, right? But it's my family. I
Yeah.
mean, this is where I've grown up professionally, and it's there at that. I wish I had the words to fully express like what I feel, the gratitude that I feel, but hopefully the sentiment will come across.
AnnMarie, where can folks buy the book?
So it's on Amazon,
Okay.
and they just look up my name
Okay.
or the title. They can find it on Amazon.
It's Survival to Safety, AnnMarie Santamarina. AnnMarie, like I said, I've been looking forward to this interview all day. I love you to pieces. I feel like I know you. I feel like I've known you my entire life, and this is the first time we've met. Thank you so much for being you. Thank you so much for sharing you and being part of our family.
Thank you, Nina. I really appreciate you as well.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode and you want to continue the conversation online, use hashtag B2B Tech Talk.